Hey everyone, it's Tanya, and I'm here with Sule. She's the founder of Humbly, basically a platform that helps create meaningful content to help you increase customer engagement. And well, she's going to talk to us today about customer engagement. Say hi.
Hi everyone, I'm Sule.
All right. So as usual, I'm going to give everyone the rundown of what we're going to do today. First, Sule is going to introduce herself and tell us what her background is and tell us why we should actually be listening to her about customer engagement. And then after that, we're going to jump a little bit into some 101s. And then, of course, my favorite part, we're going to go into a business case. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right, Sule, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So most recently, I took the plunge, and me and my co-founder started a company called Humbly. And what we do is we help pretty much mid-sized businesses create videos that are inexpensive and fast for social media. We have a tech-enabled video production platform where we connect people who are trying to create videos with awesome videographers, editors, animators in order to produce videos that will grow their business and increase customer engagement. So that's currently where most of my attention and efforts lie. But even before that, I was director of customer insights at Shutterstock for, 4, maybe 5 years. And what I was doing there was really building the practice of doing user research, qualitative user research. It started just within the product team, so helping the UX designers and the engineers really understand who their customers are and just make sure that they had access to them. You know, a lot of times you're building a product and you rarely connect or talk to the people who are actually using it. So my job at first was to facilitate those interactions and connections and making it super easy for anyone on the product team to be able to ask a real life question and maybe work through some ideas with real life customers. And so that was pretty groundbreaking because we ended up developing a practice where we would talk to 3 to 5 customers every week. And I would make sure that anyone in the company had access to people to be able to ask questions. And eventually it led beyond the product team to even the marketing team and to the other aspects of businesses like the business development team. So anyone really who was thinking about what are the trends happening with our customers' jobs and how might, Shutterstock as a company be able to help facilitate those problems, that's sort of what my team was in charge with. So it was really great being able to bring the human side to a business to acknowledge the fact that we are helping people with their day-to-day jobs and making sure we always were connected to them and we always stood up for them. I used to always say, I'm the voice of the customer, I'm the customer's champion. I am the voice of the customer within these walls. And so if you need to know what they're thinking about, if you need to know what problems they're having and how we can help, I am the person to ask. Because at the very least, I can let you have access to them directly. So that's what I was doing. And that's why I'm excited to talk to you more about getting customer insights and how you can make sure that you're always connected to your customers whenever you're growing and building a business.
Oh, I love it. And actually, I think our conversation is well timed. The project I just got staffed on within my company is actually about customer insights. So I'm going to be leaning in the whole time like this.
Love it.
All right. Can you tell us what in the world customer insights actually means?
Sure. I think in the most plainest language, customer insights really just means that you're understanding the needs, the problems, the situation that your customer is in that necessitates them having this problem where your product solves. And so you're trying to uncover, the way that I always say is that you might look at analytics, for example, right? And that tells you what is going on. You can see people are clicking on this, not clicking on this, or they're using this feature, but they're not using this feature. But you don't get the full picture. And customer insights tells you that plus why. Right? It's always important to understand why things are happening. Are they not using a certain feature because they don't know it exists? Are they not using this feature because they have no need for it and you built something that's essentially useless to them? So it's really just combining both what is happening with your product and why is it happening. So that's what we try to cover with the customer insights team.
Great. Awesome. All right. So what are some best practices when, thinking about doing customer insights?
So when you're thinking of qualitative research, the best, I would say there's a couple of different ways. I'm all for one-on-one conversations. And so I think you can get out a lot from a person with individual conversations. So that's my general rule of thumb is the more intimate it can be, the more of a safe space you're creating. And you really just want to be start the conversation building an environment where someone feels very comfortable, where they're not trying to please you, but they're just giving you the honest truth. And I think a lot of times what people forget is if you're asking someone a question and they think they might be judged on it or tested in some way, they're going to want to say things to please you, right? They're going to want to try to get it right. So it's very important to set an environment where you're letting them be the expert. You're letting them know that, listen, I'm the one who doesn't know anything. I'm coming to you for your advice. There is no wrong thing you can say. And I found that that's that sort of safeness in environment occurs faster if it's one-on-one. At most, maybe two people within your team can talk to one person, but try not to make it feel like it's a mob asking a question. So that's generally, I would say, rule number one, creating a safe space. And then I would say the next sort of tip is just to really let the conversation flow. I know some are very diligent about having a list of 10 questions, and they have the questions and they're always looking back at it. Again, back to rule number one of making it feel like a safe space. You don't want to make it feel like there's a test and that there are these things that someone has to get right or not get right. So this just takes practice. I would say try to have no more than 3 things that you generally want to talk about. In the beginning to prep, yes, write out your questions, write out the things, the flow of the conversation and how you might want it to happen. But just generally try to maintain eye contact and have a conversation with this person, because even though you know the direction that you may want it to take, they might have this whole other direction that's probably more important that they'll take you there if you let them guide you. So those 2 things are really important.
Great. All right. So sort of in giving us those best practices, you already kind of mentioned some worst practices. Any other ones that we should think about, or just things we should definitely avoid?
I would say there's a couple things. So one, how you ask questions. So I think don't project your discomfort level with certain topics onto someone. So for example, I know in tech, generally, the products that we're dealing with are mostly for people's jobs, or they're generally safe topic areas. But sometimes you could be, dealing with a wealth management tool or some sensitive topics, whether it's with money or your health. And so some people I noticed when they start, they're like, okay, now they set up the question, now we're going to get into something a little bit more personal. I hope you don't mind. Or, their body language changes when they ask someone more of a sensitive question. I just go right through it. Just ask, I think, you set up the conversation and you set up the space enough in the beginning so that people know what you're digging after. You would let them know, we're here to talk to you about your, health habits. And then you just kind of go in and ask. But I think don't project what you might be feeling to someone else. That would be one thing. And I mentioned the other quick things, but people tend to forget this. But, maintaining eye contact is important. And again, active listening. So even repeating what people are saying, just so that they know that, oh, wow, you really listened to me. Asking follow-up questions is important. Just making sure that you're always engaged and that you're always focused on that person so that they know that they're the star right now and you're really interested in what they have to say.
I am so intrigued by how that is half common sense, half counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of the things you said, in terms of just having a normal conversation. Yeah, you're having a conversation, but as you said, not projecting norms. Most people assume those are things that project politeness.
Yes, yes. And I think when you're digging for research questions, right, you have the questions that you're really grappling with in mind, right? That's the purpose of you talking to someone. So you can't be afraid to ask those questions and to ask it bluntly, not not, like you said, you don't want to be impolite, but you want to just be direct, because the most direct way you can ask the question, you will get the most direct answer. And that's really what you need. I struggle sometimes when people ask me for tips. Like, some people literally just want to know what questions they should ask. And there's that too. But I find that a lot of it really, the best interviews that I've had where I've gotten the best pieces of data, the best insights from, are when I've treated it more as a conversation. Like when I've gone in with like the bigger question that I wanted to get out of, but I wasn't so methodical, and I wasn't so, let's make sure we go through these 10 things, otherwise it's a bust. And I think people forget that human side to it, that it's people who you're helping, right? People who you're solving products for. And you want to get close to these people. You want to hear their stories, right? Anytime you can get someone telling a story where they like pictured like the moment that they were doing something, or pictured the moment where they were like, oh, I can't struggle with this anymore. I need to find something to help me with. Like, those are the nuggets that you need, that will help so many areas of your business, and will help you even understand who you're working for, right? Because the customers are people who you're working for to help solve their problems and needs. So
great. And that said, my next question, I guess embarrassingly so, is what are some good resources for finding those questions to ask? Or I guess even sort of maybe just getting a quick anthropological rundown, so you know what type of questions really do yield good answers versus those that basically stop the conversation.
yeah, so generally do not ask any yes or no questions, right? Or anything that starts with, does this happen to you? Or leading questions, yes or no questions. You want to, and I touched on this before, but you want to ask more open-ended questions that get people into storytelling mode. So I like to ask questions, or start conversations rather, with things like, describe the time when you were fill in the blank. Tell me about when you first got on the site. What did you think? If I'm actually showing them the site, walk me through your process when you. So those types of questions where you're painting more of a picture, and you're trying to get the person to remember the time that they were doing something. Helps them remember the time that they were actually doing it. And when you're asking questions like describe, and then you're following up with, tell me more about that. Or you mentioned this, let's touch on this a little bit more. That's kind of how you get at the specifics that I'm sure you have in your head that you want to touch on. But you want to start more broadly. You want to see where they go, what they sort of pick out as the most important parts. If that matches what you want to get at, then you probe on those. And if they happen to miss something, then you can just say, just curious, did you happen to think about the X part of it? Did you notice that? Did you see this? And then you can dig on those types of questions. Hope that made sense. It wasn't really, it wasn't really numbers of questions, but it was how you can get someone into telling stories.
Yeah. And then do you have any favorite websites or organizations that you go to?
I'm sure I do. Cannot think of any at the moment, but I can send you some after, or take a minute later and look.
Great, thank you. All right, switching gears a little bit into the business case. So based off of some of the things you said, just to, go with the conversation, I'm actually going to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just for background, a lot of things that I hear when people are, consulting with them about either their small business or their startup, or just even friends, or sort of, we're sitting down and having a drink and they're trying to figure out what next. That said, a lot of times what they end up with, they have a product, they have an audience, and they start to see a plateau. And they're trying to figure out, what do they do next? Do they manage to re-engage their audience and upsell them? Do they have a new product, or do they just go out and find a new audience to make more sales? But first, they sort of want to do the customer insight. Can you walk us through what someone who's sort of sitting at that juncture should do in terms of taking a look at the customer insight, and how much time they really should be spending on these different activities?
Yeah, so this is where I worked really closely with the business intelligence team or the data intelligence team. I think if you're at that point in your business, which is a great point to be at, right, where you have customers and you feel like you've plateaued, but how do you get to the next level? It's awesome because you have so much data, right? You have this certain amount of customers that you've gotten that you can learn from. And that's the best time to really dig into who's finding the most value in your product, right? So a couple of things that I would do is, one, there's this thing called the NPS survey, which just is like a health metric of how satisfied are people with your product. So you can always start with sending a quick survey just to gauge the satisfaction level that people had with your product, and then pairing that data with, let's say, how much money someone spent with you or how much usage someone has gotten, whichever your primary KPI is, using your customer satisfaction with that to see who are the most valuable customers that you have. And then once you can hone in on a smaller group of people to talk to, then I would dig into those group and have conversations with them. So things that I would try to either ask. And so this is why I would jump to qualitative even before sending another survey, is that I think surveys are a great tool, but I think it can be used prematurely if people don't know what they need to learn from a larger group of people. And so the way in which you craft the best survey is by first doing qualitative research to understand what are the things that you need to learn from this larger segment. Like, what are the points that matter? Because shorter surveys are most effective. You don't want to ask 20 questions when really all you needed to ask was 4. So once you have, let's say, your highest valued and highest satisfied customers in a bucket, I would then talk to as many as I could from that segment to understand key things, like maybe there's certain demographic data that makes sense for your business, maybe there's certain job characteristics that make sense for your business, but you would go through those types of questions to figure out, well, what is it that's similar about these groups of people that made your product so valuable to them? And then once I would do that, then I would craft a survey, a short survey, and then send that out to your larger segment that fits that profile, and either others to see if the characteristics that you've identified held true. And then once you do that, you're talking about a profile now that you can work with, right? Like, this is a marketing profile, or even a user persona profile of like, these characteristics of your customers are things that you should look out for, whether it's in other industries, or you might also discover that maybe in this high value, high satisfied customer set, that there's another offering that you can do that's related to your business that they would be willing to pay for. So that's practically how I would go about seeing whether you should create new features or a new product line, or whether you should find the characteristics and go after another group that looks similar.
Great, I love it.
Okay. Try to make it as like tactical as possible.
That's what this whole site is about.
Cool.
I go off on a little tangent, but you know what? As well-meaning as a lot of folks are, I don't like top 10 lists anymore. I don't really like all the academic jargon. I'm a tactical person. I'm an operations person. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what you did, and I'll take that and I'll apply it to what I'm doing. I'm smart enough to be able to extrapolate, but going from the academic to real life is often a hard thing for me, and I know a lot of other people.
Definitely, definitely.
All right, so we're almost near an end. Any last thoughts?
I would just say in general that, I know that I'm in it, right? Like, I'm in building my business mode. And so I'm always in the grind of like making sure it's operating in its most efficient way, that I'm like focused on my business and what I need to do. And so it can be very easy to forget how important it is to always stay in touch with the people who you're building, who you're solving this problem for, with the people who you're working with, right, to create products that help them. So And I have to, even this is what I used to do full time. Like I also have to remember this as a founder, as someone who's growing her own business. You know, I can't go too long without making sure I get a pulse check from my core customer base that like, this is something that's helpful. You know, I'm building something that they need. I'm always making sure that we're building this together. And so I know it can be, it can feel that like, oh, it's this separate thing, you know, like this, it's this nice to have element of your week or your day, but it's so crucial and it's so integral to everything that you're doing. And, you know, I think when your head's down, you keep thinking about day in, day out, right? But when you're talking to your customers, you're thinking about next month, next year even, and that's how you grow, right? That's how you make sure you're always pointing north and you're growing something that's going to be bigger than what it is now. So talking to customers is the way to do that, and getting customer insights is the way to do that. So, you know, make sure that it's a part of your grind, you know?
Oh, I love it. You just dropped like golden nuggets from the sky. Thank you for your time.
Of course. It was such a pleasure talking to you. I love that you're doing this. So
Oh,
any way I can
you.
be supportive and helpful, I will.
Well, we'll just have you back.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Sule. And then also thank you everyone for joining in and helping me coax beautiful women like Sule to tell us their stories. I really appreciate it.
Love
Good night, guys.
Bye.